What are the geopolitical consequences of the transformation of the global energy system? Fossil fuels shaped geopolitics in the past. Now, renewable energy is becoming cheaper and more readily available around the globe. Technology innovations in generation, digitalization, and energy storage will support the move away from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. This will change the global distribution of power and shape geopolitics in the age of renewables.
So I'd like to introduce the panelists. Thank you very much for coming. I'll start with myself. I'm Linda Davis, and I am the CEO of Giraffe Bioenergy, and we are looking to solve the cooking problem. So thank you that it's been mentioned. 3 billion people do not have access to clean cooking fuels with detrimental effects on their health. So that's myself. And now perhaps I'm going to ask my panelists to work with me a little bit, maybe just to give a little wave to the audience, so that way I'm not confusing myself with my right, your left, and all that. I'm not very good with that. So, so next to me is the State Secretary, Minister for Petroleum, Knutsen. Right? And if I totally butcher your name, please reintroduce yourself with the correct pronunciation. Then we have the Minister for Energy and Mineral Resources for Jordan, Hala Zawati, thank you. The Minister for the Environment, Transport and Energy Communications from Switzerland, Ms. Simonetta Sommaruga. And then we have the Foreign Minister for Maldives, Mr. Abdallah Shahid. We have the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy, African Union. That's Dr. Amani Abou-Zeid. And then finally, we have the Senior Advisor for International Security Program and Resource Security of New America, Sharon Burke. Excellent. So without further ado, we're going to get started with our deep dive. So I'm going to ask the panelists, as they answer this first question, to give some introductory remarks about your understanding of the global discussion, the political situation. So as Norway has a prominent role in the Commission on Geopolitics for Renewable Energy, it would be great if you can comment on some of the key findings of this commission.
Yes, thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting us and inviting all of us to discuss these important issues this morning here. And thank you also so much for these phenomenal keynotes this morning. It's been very interesting to hear absolutely all of them. And yes, to the question, we have been a broad part of that commission, because as we have discussed and as we all discuss at this conference and at overall, we are in a huge energy transition at this moment. The world's energy systems are in rapidly change, and we see that through technology growth, we see that through reduce of costs and so on, and we also see that the governments and the countries' environmental or policies are changing and are putting a progress into this speed. And therefore we, through Germany and through also the Emirates, asked this arena to set down this international commission to see on geopolitical impacts on this. And as we have discussed, and as it was clearly mentioned at the last keynote, these climate changes does not see any borders. And I think that is the most important point on this geopolitical discussion. And what the commission found is that they saw that we could, through this energy transition, reduce the geopolitical impacts, because we are reducing the climate impacts, we are reducing the local pollution, and we are getting people a better countries and a better societies to live in. And that's in overall what I think we have to have in mention when we are to discuss the geopolitical impacts, is that we are creating better societies for people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as we know, Jordan is considered a small country in the MENA region, and renewable energy transition, is booming in Jordan. Targets have been met and lowered by, your investments in the solar PV. So what next? What are the next steps?
Let me start by thanking you and thanking the organizers for this great Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue. Yes, Jordan is a small country, yet with big achievements. And if we're going to talk about achievements in renewable energy and the energy sector in general, I would also like to talk about the bigger picture, which is the resilience of the country and its people. And when we tell the story of energy, it tells you also the story of the resilience of Jordan and its people. So Jordan was, a few years ago, in 2012, fully dependent on gas for generating our electricity. And then actually we were hit by the Arab Spring and the shortages of gas, which hit us really hard. And the Jordanian people are still suffering because of that. Yet we faced that challenge, which was a big challenge for us. Yes, we were not ready for that challenge by looking at renewable energy as a solution. And if you asked me in 2014 what was the percentage of renewables for electrification in Jordan, I would have told you 1%. Today we exceeded 10%. End of this year, 16%, and 2020, 20%. So and this was very important for us. This year we ranked on a Bloomberg Climate Scope as the 3rd country in the world for attractiveness to renewable energy projects. This year we got an unprecedented price of solar PV power projects, which reached $2.4. So yes, Jordan is small, yet the achievements in renewable energies were really big during the past few years. What made that happen was actually the commitment of the Jordanian people, the transparency, the having a clear strategy moving forward. And you asked me what's next. So we've achieved.
Minister Zawati, that is impressive. I'd like to come back to you and kind of really get a little bit more of how you did that. But I think you all agree with me that it's just very, very impressive. We would love to have, those kind of price points, certainly in Kenya. I'd like to move on to you, Minister Sommaruga. My question to you is probably more of a general nature. If you could just set the stage, explain a little bit more detail. The impacts of the geopolitical impacts of the global energy transitions. What kind of risks are evolving? What is your understanding, sort of, how the global North and the global South are going to interact in this time of turbulence?
Thank you, Linda. I was supposed to speak in German, but I see that there is no translation here, so I think I speak in...
Can we get some translations, please? Some headsets?
No, for you?
I need one too.
Okay, I can speak in English.
Okay. Maybe we start in English.
We start in English. Okay, so my first point is I would like to thank ARENA for this report they do, because I think the energy transition and the geopolitics implications is something which is extremely important. I would like to make 3 short points. The first point is that I think the renewable energies could be a project of peace. Second point, I think about the commodities, the minerals you use, also for the new technologies, for the renewable energies, and we should not make 2 times the same mistakes. And my third point is about energy efficiency. So I start with the peace project. When I read the report, which is really very interesting, I think that we have seen in the past that the fossil energies have been some causes also for conflicts worldwide, not only conflicts, but even wars. And so I think that the renewable energies, they have the potential to have no more this kind of conflicts. Why? Because I think one of the main issues about the renewables is that there's certain independence for the countries, because they are everywhere. In every country there are renewable energies, so there is more independence from the fossil fuel exportation countries. And with the renewable energies there is the possibility to have a decentralized energy. So I think these two things is a democratization of energy. And this is something which is extremely important. So I'm very glad, but everybody knows that to have the renewable energies, the potential of them, we need investment. We need investments in the technologies, in the know-how of technologies, and I think this kind of investments, they have still to be done. And I say it especially to the industrial countries. I say it as well at the address of banks, of insurances, that they should do now their investments towards the renewable energies. If I look about all the energy investments in the 2017, there were $1,800 billion. More of half of them went still into fossil energies. So I think we have to change there, and the director of IRENA, Mr. La Camera, he said it today, very offensive. Second point about the commodities. I think the report from IRENA shows that still we have renewable energies. We need some minerals, for example, lithium, cobalt, graphite, and we knew that many of these commodities, minerals, they come from countries with a weak governance. So we should not do 2 times the same mistakes, as I say, and I think that my country, Switzerland, has a special responsibility. We have in Switzerland about 500 companies which are in the trade of commodities, and we know that human rights, environmental standards are very important for the extraction of this kind of minerals, and so I think we have a huge responsibility that, as I mentioned, we do not 2 times the same mistakes as we did with the fossil fuels, with the mines, where human rights were not respected, where the environment of the local people was destroyed. And in this sense, I think we have a responsibility also in developing the renewable energies, because today those countries which have the most commodities, the richest countries in commodities, they are at the same time, those countries have had the highest level of child death. So I think this contradiction cannot go on. And I think Mary Robinson showed us that energy is something which is very central for development, also economic development of every country. And I was during 8 years now Minister of Migration, and I know as long as we do not have economic development and energy is central for that, we still have also forced migration, which we do not want. And I think I stop with that. I just wanted to stop with the efficiency. We should not forget efficiency is also a part of climate and energy development we need for our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm taking away some keywords there. It's a peace project. That is, that I think something that we all should take with us. It should not be a point of conflict, but we can work collectively together. I think the themes are starting to form. Yeah. Now, moving on to sort of the small island nations, which again we all know are particularly vulnerable to the changes, the global changes that are happening. So to discuss this, Minister Shahid, I'd like for you to just give a general view from the lens of the Maldives, how you see renewable energy impacting specifically the geopolitics of your small island nations.
Thank you very much, Linda. First of all, I would like to thank the German Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Heiko Maas, for inviting me as a representative of the small island states to participate in this very important conference and to raise the voice of small island states. The unique nature of small island states, including the Maldives, makes it essential for us to conceptualize the renewable energy and geopolitics in a holistic manner. As many of you would know, the Maldives, for example, is an archipelago of 1,200 islands spread over an area that is geographically as large as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Our land area is a flexible one depending on the tide. When it is high tide, we have a little bit less land, and low tide, we get a little bit more. But the largest island in the Maldives is about 3 miles in length and about half a mile in width.
Wow.
The highest point that you can ever get in the Maldives is 2.5 meters above sea level. 6 feet, even just a little bit taller than me. The population of the Maldives, just like all the other small island states, is below 500,000. We are counting 350,000 plus. The beauty of nature, the beauty that the nature has endowed on us, makes us small island states special. The IPCC report that was issued in October 2018 is very clear. If the world is unable to stabilize the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees for the next 50 to 100 years, countries like the Maldives would cease to survive. I have heard on this stage several of the speakers talk about the issue of environmental change, climate change being an existential issue. For the Maldives, for other small island states, it is happening. We go through it every day. When would another tsunami hit? When would we get washed away? When would our countries cease to exist? These are questions as a generation Maldivians are asking, our children are asking, and for that reason, the technological advances that we are making are a welcome development for the Maldives. But to go back to the original question that you have put forward, for us, unless we stop the runaway impacts of climate change, some countries, such as the Maldives, because we would cease to exist, geopolitics will enter into our decision-making process only after we secure a place in the geographical map of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you. We've heard a lot about Africa today, which is good. So I'd like to invite Dr. Amani Abou-Zeid to hear your perspectives. You know, what are the relevant aspects of the global energy transition that you particularly want to emphasize?
Thank you very much, Linda. Today is a very special day. It's the second time I participate in this very important event. I'm saying it's a special day because the keynote speeches we heard this morning are very inspirational and hit special chord in my soul. I would like to refer to the speech by Her Excellency, Madam President Mary Robinson in particular, about human rights and about energy. And you've heard, we've heard a lot about Africa today, but I'll speak to a different Africa, my Africa. Energy and human rights, it's the deprivation from basic services, and especially not having access to energy is a violation of human rights. And ensuring access to all to energy is also a human right. And I want to speak to that. I want to speak to the access to everybody, and especially in Africa, to energy. As we speak, 51% of the continent's population do not have access to energy, and the 50% or so who are using energy, half of it is bioenergy from firewood and charcoal. We cannot accept that. It is, as I said, it's a violation of human rights. It's also, we also have a moral responsibility towards population. And Linda, I pay special attention to energy for cooking, yes. Knowing that on the continent there are millions of women and children who either killed and or suffocate because of the fumes from this charcoal and firewood for used in cooking. So that's the first point about human rights and energy. The second is about technology. And technology, because Africa has a fantastic story to tell when it comes to digitalization and leapfrogging in the world of technology, especially the ICT. More than ever, our continent is adopting this new technology and making it work for ourselves in paths that were not necessarily followed by any other nation or continent in the world. We're leapfrogging, we're not using or going through the traditional paths for development, and we're using even this technology in the energy. Earlier we heard about mini-grids and off-grids, and this is particularly important for us since 90% of our population lives in rural areas, and we are making this new technology work for us. We have examples and experiences like in Kenya, for instance, where an off-grid solar is paid for using the mobile money, which, by the way, was invented by Africans in Africa for the whole world. So there you go. Third, I want to talk about what we are doing in Africa. I go to all these fora and everyone is talking about Africa, but no one talks about what Africa is doing for itself, and that's what I want to emphasize. Here we have in the room Morocco, the largest solar power plant in the world as we speak, and I have had the honor of contributing myself to this fantastic project as initiator, as a financier, and also in promoting finance for this project. Followed very soon will be followed by Egypt, who is also implementing the largest, another very large, who is going to be the largest solar power plant in the world. Off-grid is rolling out across the continent. Energy transition, we're doing that across the continent in two ways. One, we are adopting at the African Union the deep path, in decarbonization path, so as to also improve the decarbonization of the existing energy resources, but also energy efficiency program, a very ambitious one, in addition to championing geothermal in Eastern Africa and other parts of the world. Special program for small island states, promoting smart infrastructure, including smart transition. Smart cities across the continent we have now smart cities using the technology in managing and in providing infrastructure, especially energy, adopted and adapted now thanks to big data, to the behavior of each and every individual on the continent. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Africa taking the lead for itself, and Africa changing itself to make sure that we are integrated continent, sustainable, providing access to all in a durable and in a sustainable way for the benefit not only of Africa but of the world.
Thank you very much. So now we've heard. Thank you very much. Appreciate those comments, and we'll come back a bit more. Sharon, you've got the enviable position of speaking after everybody has spoken, so I'm going to let you pick up on some of the key points that have been brought up from the US perspective. Again, by way of introduction, Sharon is a senior advisor on energy security and stability from the US.
Thank you so much, Linda, and it's just a pleasure to be at this wonderful conference with a really tremendous panel of speakers. So in 2016, my former boss, Barack Obama, said, if you could choose any time in human history to be alive, you would choose right now, today. Now keep in mind, he said that after the election of Donald Trump. So why would he say that? I miss him so much. Why would he say that? Well, he was looking at the bigger picture and the biggest picture of all. There are more children in school than at any time in human history. There are fewer people living with chronic hunger than at any time in human history. There are whole diseases that have been eradicated for everyone in the world, smallpox, polio. Humanity is flourishing. In 1800, there were 1 billion of us. Almost all of us lived in extreme poverty, and even the richest of us died from preventable diseases. Today, there are 7 billion of us, and far too many of us still don't live as well as we should. But so many of us live better than we ever have before. Now, there's a dark side to all of this progress. It was fueled by fossil fuels. They got us here, but the consequences are coming due. So the question now is this moment in human history, this spectacular moment in human history, is it a moment? Or is it a trend? And that depends on the energy transition, whether we can make it happen. So my government, the United States government, is talking in terms today of great power competition. The current president notwithstanding, we don't have to be afraid of competition, global competition. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It brings us investment. It creates new producers, it opens new markets, and it brings innovation. And that is what we sorely need. We heard that this morning from the IEA, that the scale of the problem we have to solve, we should be realistic about it and not underestimate it. And that is going to need a whole lot of innovation. We need the dollars to come to higher efficiency solar. We need the dollars to come to energy storage. We need the dollars to come to more efficient use of energy, wholly new uses of energy, a digital age, an information age transition from the industrial age. We need that innovation more than we've ever needed it before. And I'm glad to say that in my country, I know the rhetoric from the top is not encouraging, but that doesn't speak for everyone. My home state of California, for example, it's the 5th largest economy in the world, behind Germany, but ahead of the United Kingdom. And California has a goal of 100% clean energy for their electricity sector by 2045. So below that rhetoric at the top, there's a lot of great action happening and a lot of innovation. California will lead my country to that future, just as it has for many years. We will be there. What really concerns me when we talk about geopolitics is what the commissioners said. It's really easy to get distracted by who's up, who's down, who's going to gain power, who's going to lose power. We need to keep a laser focus on the fact that it's people. It's people that need to do better. We need to keep that trend going. So what really worries me most of all about this moment is what great power competition means in terms of where the investment really is. So the US government in its national budget puts most of its money into people. 60% of our national budget goes to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's all about people and about social services. But of the rest of the money, a great deal of it goes to defense. $1 trillion when you count the defense budget, veterans, and nuclear weapons, $1 trillion. And what I say at this moment that we should all be concerned about is that my country is not putting enough money, enough emphasis, enough activity into the everything else, into diplomacy and trade and investment. All the things that are going to bring us an energy transition, we're not doing enough there. We are hyper-focused on military means, and we are not alone. And I ask you, where does that end? If the so-called great powers are only preparing for war, there's only one end to that. It can't be a zero-sum game. We can't have some countries fall and some not get to rise, and we can't be hyper-focused on military means. What Obama said at the end of that article back in 2016 is this has to be something that is for all of us and of all of us. And that's what the energy transition looks like.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, as we get our translators, I'm going to ask Mr. Dialogue to give us an update on where we are with our Mentimeter.
Yes, the Mentimeter is running. I believe we had, last time I looked, about 43 people who had participated. So there's still time. In about 10 minutes, we'll give you the results.
Fantastic. So just by show of hands, have we interacted? Are we on there? Do we know what Mr. Dialogue is talking about? Mr. Dialogue, I think you need to talk to us a bit more. I'm not seeing many hands in the room.
Okay, all you need to do is point your phone at this image. At least on mine, that works. And you will probably be redirected to the poll. Otherwise, if you're on a laptop, just enter menti.com. And when you get to the website, you enter that number code. We will leave this up for a few seconds, and that will take you directly to the questions about this geopolitics session.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So panelists, for this session, I really want us to be a little bit more specific, right? To quote what President Mary Robinson told us, it's time for action, right? Lots of words, right? Lots of sobering words from my fellow Californian on the end seat there. But so from your specific nations, from your specific countries, while I'm asking these questions, really think about the positive, the concrete steps that you're taking that we can also borrow for our specific nation, right? So starting with you, sir, what is Norway's view on the rapid growth in renewables and the impacts on the global energy sector from the view of Norway?
Norway are very enthusiastic over the rapid growth that we see in this energy transition towards more renewables. Norway is very well experienced with renewables, as we have used our resources, both through our hydropower resources, but also on our Norwegian continental shelf on a very sustainable and a very good way. And we are very experienced in doing that. And we are already powering our private houses, powering our businesses with renewable power in almost 100%. And we have a lot of this technology, and we want to share it. We want to get in these kinds of forums and dialogues to be in this forum for discussions to share our technology and our knowledge on this theme. But I also like to say that in this transition, we know that Germany is now taking huge steps towards phasing out coal and also phasing out nuclear. And we know that Germany and also Europe are going to need sustainable and reliable energy resources. And we believe that natural gas will be a part of that for many years. But that depends on how we use our resources, and we have to use our resources in a good way. And at last, I have to bring also up the dimension on social acceptance around renewables. As my colleague mentioned, this is a peace project, but it's our responsibility to make this a peace project, because we know, we have learned also from Norway that discussions on onshore wind are not uncontroversial. These are big debates, and we see that many just not want this project in their countries and not in their backyards. And we have to go in front. We have to show a good political leadership to make this green energy transition happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Minister Zawati, you had started to answer this question, and I cut you off. But perhaps you can continue giving us, your experiences developing, the solar projects that you talked about. Being very specific, perhaps commenting on the the political will, for instance. Nothing happens in a vacuum. The investment. How did you all put this together for you to now, speak of the successes that you do?
Thank you, because it's a joy for me to talk about the story of renewables in Jordan. As I said, the advancement we did in renewable energy, along with colleagues from Morocco in the Arab world, is really a story to tell. So reaching today 10% of our electricity from renewables, in addition, by the way, to a figure that might be stunning for most of the people, today in Jordan, we reach over 99% of our population with our grid. So today, very few actually would be connected off-grid with solar systems. And despite that, and despite reaching all these people, today we launched a new project, and it's for the poor specifically, and it's on-grid solar systems for the poor who are today benefiting from a national aid fund, and that would be for free, giving them solar systems on their rooftops or in backyards. But what made this happen in Jordan? I started to say that the commitment of the Jordanian government and people to support renewable energy, the legal framework, and believe me, if it wasn't for the legal framework which we set in 2012, we wouldn't be where we are today. So any country that wants to go for renewables needs to set the legal framework first. Second, the tax incentives that we gave, and this was really very important as well. The capacity building of the people. Today we have over 450 companies in Jordan providing energy efficiency solutions and renewable energy solutions. And Jordan is a small country, as we said, so this number is phenomenal for us in Jordan. Also, we worked very hard to spread awareness, and spreading awareness was by doing rather than talking about the thing. So we have a fund in the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. It's called JREEF, the Jordan Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Fund. And we do go to all sectors and fund some projects. We funded solar water heaters on rooftops for over 20,000 households in Jordan, because we do believe that one house that has a solar water heater, I mean, the neighbors would be envious of not spending that much on solar water heating. And so this is spreading awareness. We went to hotels and implemented energy efficiency measures. We went to factories and implemented energy audits and reduction of usage of energy, lots and lots, to mosques, and installed renewable energy systems. And all this that I'm talking about is on the, say, consumer level. But the big picture, you should come today to a governorate in Jordan called Ma'an, where most of the solar farms are there. And it is really a success story. Many of the German companies probably sharing with us today know what I'm talking about, because we transferred also the experience from here. Facilitating finance, and this is very important. And this is something that we have done. The Central Bank of Jordan facilitated funds for renewable energy with an interest rate that is low, almost half the interest rate for other projects. The right policies and procedures at the time. And today, we've reached the point where Mr. Fateh from IEA spoke about. We are going to 20% of renewable energy, and we are facing the issues that he talked about. And let me here talk a little bit about the geopolitics of things,
So,
just to show you that when you reach that point, it is very important that you have good connections, interconnections, integrated grids between your country and the countries around. And this affects the relationship between countries. So is renewable energy affecting the geopolitics from other sides than Her Excellency talked about? Yes, because today we do see clearly that it will be very costly for us to go for more renewables unless we were able to export part of it or exchange with neighboring countries. The cost of storage is kind of high, but export and export-import between countries would be much cheaper. And that's another reason why renewable energy would be changing the geopolitical map of the world.
Thank you very much. Very concrete steps. I am really thankful for how you've articulated that. Minister Sommaruga, I'm going to, first of all, you may be able to speak in German because now we have our headsets. You know, again, so I'm using you to kind of give us more background and basics on this issue. So the question I want to ask is specifically on the report that on geopolitics and renewables. Is there anything that we have not heard so far? You know, if you had to highlight specific aspects from that report, what would you like this audience to know?
Well, thank you. I think the report is, there is very many things in it, but I think when you read the report, you get very excited because you think this is really a wonderful project and a good direction we can go on. When you think about afterwards, I think there are some questions. I mean, this energy transitions has opportunities, but it has also losers. And what about the losers? What about those countries who live still until now and maybe also the next few years or tens of years from the export of fossil fuels? What about them? They will also have to have a kind of change, a kind of project. And I think we have to think about that as well, because I was very much impressed by what you told about the energy transition in Jordan, also my commissioner from the African Union. I think the transition has to be socially accepted. The population has to understand what happens. Every change is difficult. Switzerland has a direct democracy, so when we introduce, for example, a tax on CO2, we have a referendum. So people have to accept that. And I think this kind of changes, it would be worth to still look a little bit where are the opportunities, how can we get there, what about the losers, those people who are afraid that they have less chances until now. And I think this is not that we need a new report, but I think this has to be still discussed quite a lot. Otherwise, maybe in 10 years when we come back here, then we are not as optimistic as we are today. And I would like to be optimistic, but I think that so we have really to think about how this transition can go on so that people understand it, they can support it, and it's also the best for every one of them. And I think this is quite a challenge for all of us, either in Switzerland as a country where we have already introduced, for example, this CO2 tax. This is a tax on stationary fuels, and we give 2/3 of this tax, we give back to the population. So I think for socially this is a good thing, because people who do not need a lot of this kind of stationary fuels, they get back more money than they spend. And those who need a lot of stationary fuels, because they have big houses, so they have to pay. And 1/3 we get back We do not give back to the population, and with that we have a program for changes for the buildings, having more sustainable buildings and heating, and this was accepted in a referendum in our country. It would not be accepted probably if we introduced a tax on CO2 for the cars. So I think mobility is still something which is very, very difficult for people to accept any changes at all, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, and I'll ask a follow-up question in the next round about some very key points that you made. But I really do want to hear back from the Maldives. How will the Friends of Maldives help the country in contributing to security in the Indian Ocean, and what specifically are you doing as a country, to secure yourselves?
Thank you, Linda. Geopolitics is usually understood in its conflictual concept. It's a rivalry. But I believe, and Maldives believes, that in case of renewable energy and climate change, geopolitics should be interpreted as to promoting. That was nice.
I don't know what that means.
It should be promoted as interdependence, collaboration, and cooperation, and shared responsibility. We have to change the concept of geopolitics. When we look at Maldives' location in the Indian Ocean, on the east, we are east and the west, we are equidistant from the coast of Indonesia and to the coast of Somalia on the west.
Wow.
That is where we straddle in the Indian Ocean. We are also from the north to the south across the equator. The 8.5-degree channel of the Maldives is one of the most used sea lanes of the Indian Ocean. 90,000 vessels cross the 8.5-degree channel every year. 90,000 vessels is about 36 billion tons of cargo. And almost 2/3 of it is oil, traded between the Middle East and Asia, Northeast Asia. For the Maldives, it's important to make sure, however small we are, to make sure that the responsibility that geographically has been bestowed on us to provide free maritime travel between these two large economies is sustained. And for that, we need to have good relationship between all countries, and sometimes good relationships come with a lot of diplomacy, a lot of diplomatic work. Sometimes it doesn't work, but most of the time we have been able to survive as an independent state forever, however small the country may be. With renewable energy, what we are going to see is the economies are going to grow because the cost of production is going to be decreased at a larger scale. The trade between countries will increase. So the cargo that will be carried across the Maldives from the Middle East to the Northeast Asia is not going to reduce, it's going to increase. The tension is going to increase if free maritime trade routes are not able to be maintained. And that is why we have very good relations with India. We have also subscribed to the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States in order to maintain this freedom of trade, maritime trade in the Indian Ocean. Maldives takes the responsibility that geography has bestowed on us very seriously.
Thank you very much. Right. Very sobering statistics indeed. So back to you, Dr. Ramani. What are the political implications of less dependencies on hydrocarbon? I know you framed your discussion as human rights, but if we can get a little bit technical on, so how is Africa going to respond with less trade in hydrocarbon?
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. I think it's unfair, even though we often say Africa, but it's also unfair because we talk about 50-plus countries.
Correct.
And it's not monolithic. So, and you have, for all these countries, either different levels of development and or different levels of development of particular sectors. So here is actually the challenge for organizations or for supranational organizations like the African Union, how to come up with solutions and or policies that cater for all these countries. Now, the African ambition, as stipulated by the African strategy, is a united, integrated continent, including infrastructure, and benefiting from this incredible resources and potential that we're having on the continent. If we talk about energy, for instance, you know that 12% of the hydro potential exists on the continent, huge potential for geothermal, in addition to solar and wind and others. For the continent to grow as we want it to grow, then industrialization is also very much there, and the ambition is to industrialize and to transform resources that we have. For this, we need energy and huge amounts of energy. So what we're doing is a special program for policy harmonization and regulatory framework harmonization. I think it was spoken to by Her Excellency Minister from Jordan. It is important if we are to create this huge energy market across the continent. And still, I want to stress again that access is of prime importance to the continent, access to all, but also energy that is reliable and that could be used in industrialization. So a policy harmonization and regulatory framework harmonization are important to that end. Now, we also have countries who are either importers of fossil fuel and those who are exporters of fossil fuel. The good news is that the renewable technologies are now cheaper, more affordable, more viable in investment terms. So many of our countries, those who are traditionally have been importing fossil fuels, we see more and more adoption of these renewable solutions across the continent. And even the better news is that the producers and exporters of fossil fuels on the continent are also aware of this rise of renewables and the availability and viability of this industry, and are adopting gradually renewable solutions so as to provide also a very viable energy mix growing into sustainability. So I think this is very smart, and it is very encouraging to see this happening on the continent. We do recognize as well that some, you heard it from Mr. Birol this morning, particularly the producers of coal and so on, we still have issues with that. That's why at the African Union we also developed this action-oriented program for that I mentioned earlier about decarbonization path, in order to help our countries find out, how to transit, how to ensure this transition in the energy systems in the short, medium, and long term. I can go on and on. When it comes to mini grid and off grid and the geothermal and all these adapted solutions. But I think what I wanted to say is that there is, with these 50+ countries, you would also have to have multiple solutions and adapt adapt your approach to the variety of constituencies we are serving on the continent. That's what's happening now, and what is encouraging that our countries are seeing themselves now that with the advances in technology and renewables, that they are affordable more and more, or increasingly affordable and increasingly viable. So we are adopting them. Last but not least, whether it's a producer, because remember now with the technology, one individual could also be a producer of energy, whether it's an individual or a multinational, at the end of the day, it's an investment. And it has to be viable. And that is why I'm also making the link with improving the investment climate as a whole on the continent to make sure that whatever solution that's being there and whatever investment that's getting into energy is, we have a fertile and conducive environment that would make this investment happen.
A very important point, and I would like to press you a little bit more on how you sell expensive products to poor people. You know, sometimes when you have investment viability and you look at your customers, you know, sometimes there's a disconnect. So I'd like to maybe in the next round talk a little bit more about, you know, what investors want, you know, double-digit returns sometimes, and sometimes you find that is not viable. So, but we can talk, we'll definitely have a chance for you to react to that comment. So Sharon, you spoke earlier about some disconnects between you know, the administration and the actual practical things we have to do for the transition. So I'm going to let you pick up from where you left off around, okay, so be that as it may, what is the United States committing to as far as this dialogue is concerned?
Well, the United States, at a national level, remains committed to the Paris Accords at this point. The president has said he intends to withdraw, but he cannot do that until 2020. So that's outside of his current term. So we'll see how that goes. So at the moment, we remain committed. I think also you see that an energy transition continues in the United States no matter what. That despite, again, the so-called, you know, the reversal on this so-called war on coal, which I think is a truly cruel way to talk about it, because that transition's happening no matter what. And when you talk about winners and losers, Madam Minister, those people in my country are losing, and we need to make sure that they have a better path. And so telling them that we're going to end the war on coal is, you know, just wrong. And in fact, the latest reports out of our energy administration show that coal has continued to fall in the United States fairly dramatically. So natural gas is displacing coal. Investment in renewables is continuing apace. And there are many states in the country that have not slowed down on this transition at all. I mean, California, which is good to know, I have a fellow Californian here, is the largest, most populous state in the country, and it will pull the nation in that direction. So no matter what is happening in the White House, or as we say in Washington, inside that beltway, the country around it is changing. And all politics are local, all energy politics are local, but in the biggest places where the most change is happening, this transition is already well underway.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we've got about 5 minutes left in our session before we go for lunch, and this is how I'd like to spend those 5 minutes. Firstly, I'd like to bring Mr. Dialogue to let us know how we are polling on the geopolitical session. And while he's coming up, I'm going to do a lightning round, literally 30 seconds, where I'll go around, maybe I'll start with Sharon, and then 30 seconds, your closing remarks. If there's one thing you didn't get to discuss, you want to react to what our colleagues have said, it's going to be 30 seconds, and then we're going to leave. So I'm going to start with Mr. Dialogue.
All right, thank you, Linda, and thanks to the panelists, and thanks to the audience. You know, these guys collectively made BETD 2019 the #1 trending hashtag on Twitter today. So we beat the YouTubers. Congratulate yourselves. I'd like to go directly to the questions on the Mentimeter. We also had 190 people participate, so thank you very much, and sorry about the Wi-Fi glitch. So I think most of you agreed that we will have more global trade on energy commodities. We heard this morning that we're going to have more energy consumption in the future in general. That's the expectation. Some of you are still voting, as you can see. Renewable energy changes value creation, and you think that's going to shift geopolitical power. There's overwhelming consent on that in the room. Here we have a bit more of an equal spread. Fossil fuels were a main driver. What do you think about the impact of renewables on geopolitics? And the room is a bit divided on that issue. Do I have a couple of minutes now for some tweets? Yeah? Can I have a few minutes for some tweets?
You can take a minute, yes.
Okay, take a minute, just a minute. So we had several tweets per minute. I'm just going to take a look at a couple here. Anna-Sophie Garrigou is editor of the Beam, so we have journalists in the room. And you notice that she picks up on the idea of a just transition. We had that actually several times from the press, so here's Renewable Watch. So I don't know, maybe that's one way to reach the press, is to talk about more of the general issues. We also had a lot of tweets that were not in English, but fortunately I speak every language, so that's no problem. Here we have a gentleman talking about the increase in emissions and being a bit upset that last year was a record level. And in Spanish, we had a couple of tweets about how there's an estimate that energy demand will rise by 80%. And so maybe there's also something going on there in the Spanish-speaking world. So I'll hand over back to you, Linda, and thank you very much. I'll see you after the lunch break.
Thank you very much. Okay, so back to our panel. So this is your closing round, and we'll make it as quick as possible. But if you could also just touch a little bit about the losers. I know I've given you 30 seconds, heavy topics, but sum up the panel. Geopolitics. What are we doing about the losers? So starting with you, Sharon.
I think, what are we doing about the losers? I want to say I would be remiss in not mentioning, and this is a total sore spot, I apologize to all my German colleagues, but when we talk about geopolitics, we have to talk about Nord Stream 2. And what I would say is, avoid this social media vortex, this temptation to be Manichaean about it. It is not all one or all the other. Germany and all the winners and losers in this need to do what they need to do for their energy security. And they make a reasonable push for diversification, but at the same time, we have to be mindful of who you empower and what the consequences are in every decision we make when we make it.
Thank you. Dr. Rahmani?
I'm reminding everybody that 51% of Africa's population has no access to energy, and that's a moral responsibility of all. I'm also reminding everybody that the continent, some of the fastest growing economies in the world are Africans, and Africa is providing the whole world with a huge investment opportunity, probably the largest in the whole world. So it's also an invitation to everybody to invest in Africa and work with Africans to change our reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
The Maldives' contribution to global CO2 emission is 0.0012%. That is all we contribute. But we are a frontline state, and we are going to face the consequences at the first round. But my warning is that it's not going to stop there. It will affect us, all the humanity. So let us get cracking. Thank you.
Minister?
My colleague from Jordan said that for the energy transition you need a legal framework. I agree completely. So I think the politicians are really in the responsibility. When I saw today there were the politicians mostly female, I think the energy transition will also be mostly female. Thank you.
I'd like to say that things have changed. There is no more I produce, you consume. There is no more I have the upper hand. There is no more you need me. All of us today can produce energy from renewable energy sources, whatever these sources are. So today it's we produce, we consume, and we need each other. Change is dared by few, willed by more, and accepted by all. And let's be the ones who make the change.
I would like to conclude that through this transition, we need to make sure that through that legal framework that is mentioned, we make sure that we could create and that the market can create new great business models for ensuring that we are reaching our goals to getting more renewable into the market. That's the only way we could get this up in speed. We have to make sure that there can be good business models also for this. So I think I will conclude with that.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this panel. I'm sure you agree with me that it was very thought-provocative, so if we can give them a collective round of applause together. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.